how do they do that exactly? They're going to worship these objects right here. These little mini sub-conflicts play out using these main ideologies, these main battles within the conscious domain. And they're going to use this as a prop to fight their own little mini sub-battles. And what happens here is that these dualities don't really have to make sense when it comes to the main battle, right? These can completely contradict the other. But it doesn't matter because the subjective wants its side to win. So it's going to do anything necessary in order to advance the agenda of whatever particular side it's on within these dualities. These are examples of sub-dualities here that have kind of an internal nature to it. It's always, the battle between the two polarities is always ongoing. So you're going to worship any of these objects here as opposed to its antithesis, right? So for example, if you worship the feminine or femininity, you're going to worship a certain type of femininity in a particular area. And so you're going to oppose the masculine and vice versa. The masculinity is going to react to the feminization of culture, for example. So what these little mini sub-conflicts are going to combine, and they're going to ally themselves or associate themselves to the main parent ideology. And again, because this is the subjective realm, right, it's not going to make any particular sense, right? These associations are going to be arbitrary, and they're going to be based on whatever helps advance the agenda of either of these polarities the most. So what happens is that these little sub-conflicts are going to reinforce themselves so well that each side is going to think that they're going to possess true, for example, true freedom or true law and order, right? So if you have a polarity between order and freedom, or order and freedom and self-preservation, each side is going to think that they will possess the true antithesis while also being for the thesis, if that makes sense. For example, this side here might believe that, might be expressly for the masculine, but will also believe that they possess true feminine, and vice versa, right? So you can see how these little mini sub-conflicts help to reinforce the structure of the conscious main duality within the subconscious, within the subconscious sub-conflicts. And this self-reinforcing nature is going to help maintain belief and sort of gloss over the inherent hypocrisy of all of these objects here and also this main ideological battle here. Each of these sides are going to have inherent hypocrisies or weaknesses, but since it's subjective bias here, it's going to be glossed over and structurally reinforced by the subjective's attachments or fascination to whatever objective neutral objects that exist within this domain. Right, so this is very important. This is a very important mechanism here. Each ideology is going to be able to maintain its own aura of truth by glossing over and sort of justifying away its hypocrisies. And that's basically the story of the duality of man, right? Man wants to have it both ways. Man wants to have its cake and eat it too. Because essentially, what is the duality of man? It is man wanting to have it both ways. And that's what the subjective is trying to fulfill when it's buying into a particular political ideology, or a religion, or a philosophy. And again, because these dualities on their own are too brazenly subjective, and they're not strong enough to stand on their own. They have to rely on the main conflicts here, happening in the conscious main duality, the main conscious conflict here, right? Even though each of these ideologies could completely contradict whatever this object is, each of these objects are going to have a vested interest in advancing its own agenda, right? So for example, femininity has a vested interest in surviving within the collective subject, as does masculinity. And so the collective force is going to try to counter, and also, for example, the collective force within the collective is going to try to counter the individual force. If the individual is trying to break away and have its own way too much, the collective is going to try to rein in and sort of put a stop to it. And that's going to be happening through either of these ideologies here. So now we're going to go over how this relates to free will. And because the political ideology is a manifestation of the subject's simulation of its own free will, the fantasy is that it can affect its environment in some way by possessing the one true ideology. It's the idea that I, through my free will and subjective actions, can possess the one true ideology in the same way that a religious worshiper believe that they can worship the one true God. And so what is the only thing that can break this here? Because the subject is now attached to and under the spell of these objects here, this duality here, and this duality here. So the only thing that can break the reign that these objects have over the subject is something that is completely antithetical to this here, the free will, which is the only thing that can break this is the third-party objective, right? Whatever exists that is neither this or this, that is neither these dualities here. And because of that, this third-party objectivity is always going to be seen as a threat, because the subject has a vested interest in maintaining this conflict, right? This conflict has gone on for such a long time that it has developed a self-justifying, it is now a self-justifying process. So anything that puts an end to this conflict here will be seen as a threat, because it's something new, and it's something that is not under the control of either of these domains here. And it's not going to be under the control or imagination of the subject. It's going to be something that is completely unimaginable, right? Because political ideology, whether it's right-wing or left-wing, is self-reinforcing. It's self-justifying. So it's like a superorganism that's made up of the individuals who buy into it. So it exists independent of justification. And so the only thing that can break a duality is something that is beyond the free will of the subject's entire simulation of its control. And specifically, it has to be beyond the control of all of the lawyers, right? The lawyer class. There's going to be a class of people who are experts at arguing for both sides and also arguing for the subjective, right? Justification and rationality is an exercise of the subjective free will. So there are going to be people who can justify either side or play the role of a centrist and be the reasonable one in between these two dualities here. But the third-party objective is going to be beyond the control of all of these.